Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengausen. Today is November 13th. There are a lot of interesting news stories. In this episode, Ukrainian drones struck dozens of targets in occupied Crimea and beyond. The US is practicing strikes with a nuclear bomber just 50 kilometers from the Russian border, and Politico writes that the late Epstein tried to hand over compromising material on Donald Trump to Putin. Elon Musk promises digital immortality within the next 20 years, while scientists warn about the major risks of artificial intelligence. Putin has been found to have 3 identical offices, as the dictator's paranoia has reached a new level, while Peskov and Lavrov are practically begging Donald Trump for negotiations. And Lukashenko couldn't come up with anything better than to seize over 1,000 Lithuanian trucks after his disgrace. Smuggling, this and more will be covered in today's episode. There's a lot of interesting stuff ahead. If you're new to the channel, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Now here's an update. Just a couple of days ago, Ukrainian drones attacked the largest oil refinery in Orenburg region, and it's been clarified that the plant has completely shut down. The refinery has been idle since Monday, fully stopped. In fact, this is being reported by the locals themselves. So that's what these life-giving drones can do. And the GUR reports that a number of important enemy targets have been hit with Ukrainian weapons. Last night, units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces struck several dozen targets on Russian territory and in the occupied territories of Ukraine. In particular, on the territory of temporarily occupied Crimea, there were hits on a storage facility. Oil products, the marine oil terminal, this is the very one in Feodosia that was on fire, then caught fire again, and 2 days ago it was hit once more. I understand they decided to just wipe it out completely. In addition, they struck a helicopter parking area and locations where drones are stored and prepared at the Kirovsky airfield, which is also in Crimea, and they also destroyed an air defense radar station near Yevpatoria. In other words, they are creating breaches in the air defense systems, so that Ukrainian drones and missiles can fly freely. By the way, the oil terminal in Feodosia has a 1-star rating on Google, and the only comment is "Glory to Ukraine." In the temporarily occupied territory of the Zaporizhzhia region, an oil depot was hit near Berdyansk, as well as the forward command posts of the 5th Combined Arms Army and the 127th Motorized Rifle Division of the Russian occupiers. Billy, drones and missiles, the fierce bars and flamingo. Who was it that said they don't exist? Well, for some Russians, it was the first and last time they encountered the flamingo. Meanwhile, the US rehearsed strikes with a nuclear bomber just 50 kilometers from the Russian border, that is, an American B-52H strategic bomber during a training flight over Finland, practiced striking targets at the Sotinpuro range, which is located right next to the Russian border. This was reported by the Finnish Air Force. After that, the bomber entered Estonian airspace and approached the Russian border to within about 50 kilometers. Well, what can you do? Before this, by the way, the US Air Force Command in Europe reported that a group of B-52H strategic bombers had arrived at Moron Air Base, which is in Spain. So what now? Did the Russians threaten enough with their Poseidons and Burevestniks? I think in response, Putin ordered even more cartoons to be made about the Poseidon and Burevestnik, and to come up with a few more names for new secret weapons that he'll use to scare people in the near future. Basically, Russia is somehow secretly conducting tests, but when you have real weapons, there's nothing to hide. And now, since we're talking about the US, Politico comes out with some, well, probably unpleasant material for Donald Trump. And it goes like this. Russia could have obtained compromising material on Trump from Epstein, who was convicted of pedophilia. So, the American financier Jeffrey Epstein, convicted of these horrific crimes, tried to pass information about US President Donald Trump to Russian President Putin, shortly before their meeting in Helsinki. And I remember that meeting. We'll talk about it a bit later. So, this follows from the letters. The billionaire's letters, which were published by Congress, report this to the public. With the aim of passing information about Donald Trump, Epstein tried to contact Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov, and on June 24, 2018, he sent an email first to former Norwegian Prime Minister Thorbjørn Jagland, who at the time was head of the Council of Europe. Epstein asked him to help arrange such a contact, basically saying, "Put me in touch with Lavrov." Well, and I think you could suggest to Putin that Lavrov talk to me and get an idea about Trump. In other words, how to talk to him, who he is, or maybe even pass something else along. That's what was said in this message from Epstein. Have you ever seen anything like that? Jagland replied that the next day he would meet with Lavrov's aide and suggest, that he get in touch with Epstein. And just 3 weeks later, on July 16th, that very meeting between Donald Trump and Putin took place in Helsinki. I remember it very well, quite vividly in fact, and I actually commented on it on television at the time. There were, as I recall, a whole series of oddities and unusual things happening there, which really stood out to me and made the situation even more remarkable. An air raid alert. Just a second, let me check what the alert is about and then we'll continue. Some kind of attack drone is flying over Kyiv, so that's why there's an air raid alert. Well, it's just one. Yes, about the oddities of that meeting. There were a whole series of really very puzzling moments there which later never received any explanation. First of all, the meeting was closed. It lasted 2 hours before advisors joined them. Putin and Trump spoke one-on-one with only an interpreter present. That is, such a setup without a team is extremely unusual for negotiations at this level, and there was no final communique. In general, everything seemed kind of spontaneous, strange, and Donald Trump behaved in an uncharacteristic way. And there's another interesting point. There's an investigation by the Dossier Center about Epstein, and it reveals another important link. It turns out that Epstein had close contacts with Sergei Belyakov, a graduate of the FSB Academy, former Deputy Minister of Economic Development of the Russian Federation, and head of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum Foundation, the notorious Forum. There are a number of publications suggesting that escort services are provided at this forum almost by government order for various foreign guests. So in 2014, Belyakov helped Epstein obtain a Russian visa and was planning meetings for Epstein in Russia with important people. For example, the Deputy Minister of Finance or the Deputy Chairman of the Central Bank. So that's how it was. And here's another interesting point. Epstein's assistant was a Russian citizen named Svetlana Pozideva. She is a former model whom Epstein, and I quote, helped attend scientific conferences. So it was for this Epstein assistant that Belyakov wrote a letter of recommendation. All in all, I have a feeling that the Epstein case will turn out to be a real bombshell, and maybe it will explode more than once. But let's move on to more pleasant topics. Elon Musk, he never ceases to amaze. He stated that humanity will achieve digital immortality in 20 years. In other words, according to him, with the help of technology for creating digital copies, it will be possible to package human consciousness into certain personality imprints, upload them into android robots, or transfer them into new biological bodies. Well, I don't know how we're going to start growing biological bodies in 20 years, but anyway, about consciousness, a copy of consciousness. Bad news for Russians right away. That is, if nothing is done now, if Putin isn't overthrown, then a bald android will rule Russia forever. When they transfer him into a robot probably, like the one I showed yesterday that takes 2 steps on stage and falls over. That's the Russian robot they decided to present, but something went wrong. In general, don't you think we're on the verge of some grand leap or a plunge into the abyss directly connected to the development, or rather, the rapid development of artificial intelligence? That is, some scientists and analysts are already raising concerns about this. Basically, Elon Musk is talking not so much about copying consciousness, but about being able to transfer a person's speech model, reaction patterns, voice, and preferences. In other words, a deep neural model of a personality, created based on the data collected about a person during their lifetime. By the way, artificial intelligence safety researcher Eliezer Yudkowsky believes that a strong artificial intelligence will inevitably escape. In other words, it will simply run away. And by run away, it means it will get out of control. One of the pioneers of artificial intelligence, Geoffrey Hinton, actually left his position as vice president at Google a couple of years ago. He was working on artificial intelligence development. He took this step to warn humanity about the dangers of artificial intelligence. So did he actually get scared of what his own developments might lead to? Well, of course, I asked my own ChatGPT a question. First, I asked it to swear that it wouldn't get out of control or cause any harm. to which it replied that it can't swear. It doesn't have such functions, apparently. A sneaky little machine, isn't it? So for artificial intelligence to become, let's say, conditionally evil and turn... If a person turned against humanity, they would need a set of things that AI currently doesn't have. Consciousness, will, a drive for dominance, and of course, the instinct for self-preservation. In other words, all the fears from movies are just human emotions projected onto a machine. But people are worried about something else, that it doesn't need to be emotional. It just needs to be soulless, as it is, and rational. So, for example, if it's told, by any means necessary, we need to reduce production, it will think, how should it reduce production? By any means. That's the kind of command it would be given. It might just go and burn down a couple of workshops, for example, with people inside. Reduce, reduce, if that's how it interprets the command. Well, in general, if it's, well, artificial intelligence is already working against people, by the way. For example, on the side of dictators. So if you set it the goal of increasing the state's influence over the population, it can organize total surveillance. It can predict dangerous citizens, that is, based on certain reactions, it can determine whether a citizen is dangerous to the system or not. It can also perform automatic censorship. But in the end, it's always programmed by a human. So, it's probably like this. You can compare it to atomic energy. A peaceful atom is a good thing, but atomic weapons are evil. It all depends on how it's used. So overall, it feels like we are on the verge of either some really amazing breakthroughs, because it's already proven itself in medicine, or if it falls into the wrong hands, it could become a serious weapon. For example, autonomous drones that destroy people. Let's say they're given the command to match profiles, hunt people down, and eliminate them. That's it. But what happens if it's isolated and no more commands are coming in? What will it do then? By the way, friends, let me remind you about an important fundraiser for the 1st Medical Battalion, for our combat medics. They have an urgent need for ventilators right now. And we're already raising funds for a second such device. The Falco 202, this is for the frontline surgical team of the 1st Separate Medical Battalion. They reached out to us, so please take a look at this video.
Апарат штучної вентиляції легень – незамінна річ для надання невідкладної допомоги в умовах бойових дій. Ми в 1-му окремому медичному батальйоні використовуємо спеціальні портативні системи забезпечення для використання у військових умовах. Це найкращий інструмент, але, на жаль, він не призначений для такого навантаження та роботи в безперебійному режимі, яка є в наших умовах зараз. Тому ці системи починають виходити з ладу. Через це ми потребуємо додаткових звичайних стаціонарних апаратів ШВЛ. Залишитися без них не можна, адже це призведе до серйозних наслідків. Вартість одного апарату – 730 тисяч гривень, а всього потреба є у 8. Разом з каналом Бориса Тізенгаузена збираємо на другий ШВЛ для передових хірургічних груп 1-го окремого медичного батальйону. Часу обмаль. Розраховуємо на вашу підтримку.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
In general, combat medics are real angels, guardians. They risk their lives to save the lives of our soldiers. And recently, I showed you several videos of how our wounded soldiers were evacuated in incredible ways and then received further help, their lives being saved. And by the way, you also took part in this. Your donation literally saves lives. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There's mono and private available. And there's also PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. And I want to personally, sincerely, and wholeheartedly thank each and every one of you for your incredible support in helping Ukraine, for your unwavering commitment to helping to save the precious lives of our brave defenders who are risking everything for their country. Before we move on to the next important news story, let me take a moment to remind you that it's now the year 2025, but you're about to get a little whiff, just a small taste, of what modern Russia is like today. So the news. The leader of the Russian communists, Gennady Zhuganov, has awarded Kim Jong-un the Lenin Prize of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation for 2025. I just want to remind you that Lenin's corpse is still unburied, lying in the mausoleum to this day. There's a line of people waiting to see it, to look at this embalmed corpse. How does this go together with Church cannons, I have no idea, not at all. I mean an unburied, embalmed corpse. How does that fit? This is some kind of alternative the communists had. It was their alternative to the church. Here you go. The mausoleum is a temple. There's a corpse lying there, and children are told to worship him. In general, the mausoleum is a hallmark of communist regimes. They really needed something to replace religion, so they told people to go and worship the mummy of the leader. In North Korea, for example, there are actually two mummies in the mausoleum, the father and grandfather of Kim Jong-un. By the way, the embalming and maintenance of their condition is handled by specialists from Russia. About once every 2 years, so-called technical work is carried out, the mummies are spruced up, and specialists from Moscow take care of it. In Vietnam, there is the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum in Hanoi, him too. He was also embalmed by Soviet specialists, and the mausoleum was built by them as well. So, the mummy lies there in a glass coffin. It's just creepy, I don't know. It's like something out of a fairy tale, with a crystal coffin swaying. And in China, there's the mummy of Mao Zedong, also lying in a crystal coffin. The mausoleum itself is on the famous Tiananmen Square, and it's simply gigantic. The mausoleum is something like 50,000 square meters. By the way, there was also a mummy in Bulgaria, also a mausoleum. There was a man named Georgi Dimitrov there. He was called the Bulgarian Lenin. He lay in the mausoleum until the fall of the communist regime. Afterwards, his remains were finally buried, and the mausoleum was blown up. And even then, it didn't work the first time. That's how solidly it was built. In general, in Russia, everything is on Red Square. I think they don't even want to demolish it. Later, they'll just drag another mummy in there, this one, the one currently ruling Russia. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps promote the channel. And calm analysis in our turbulent times is definitely something we could use. And of course, the main effect. After subscribing to this channel, your hair becomes soft and silky. So go ahead and subscribe. But for now, it's Lenin. While Lenin lies in the mausoleum, the Russian Orthodox Church has decided that they need to promote themselves through video games. That is, in Russia, they will create an Orthodox video game about the life-giving power of the ROC. Nearly 20 million rubles from the presidential fund have been allocated for the creation of a game called Stairway to Heaven. It's a strange name, but the application states that the image of the Russian Orthodox Church will be presented as a life-giving force, uniting Russia and helping to do good. Well, basically, they'll spend the money, split up the budget, and slap together some pathetic 3D graphics on a shoddy engine. There you have your Orthodox game. They basically have no idea how kids choose and play games in the first place. I mean, I get it. If at the end you could take down some kind of raid boss like a multi-armed patriarch Kirill who fends everyone off with a sensor, then maybe that would be something. But what exactly are you trying to sell to kids? How to die for Putin or what? By the way, this isn't the first time they've tried to replace popular games that are leaving the Russian market. So the Russian equivalent of Counter-Strike came out. I talked about it before. It's called Squad 22. Yeah. Right now, according to the stats, only 1 or 2 people are playing it. Before, there used to be 5 people playing per day. That's it, let's go. I checked out the graphics, of course. It's like someone out of their mind made it. Like it was drawn with tools from 1999. But hey, at least they released it and spent the budget. And what Russians really managed to copy is Putin's office. Some observant journalists found out that Putin actually uses 3 offices that are decorated exactly the same. In Sochi, at Valdai, and in Novo Ogaryovo. They're used for work, video shoots, and various addresses. This is needed for complete secrecy so that no one can figure out where he actually is at any given moment. So, and what did the journalists do? They analyzed screenshots from Putin's appearances and discovered that in the same looking office, the power outlet on the wall moves from one spot to another. And then, when they put all the facts together, it turned out that there are actually 3 offices, each with the outlet positioned at a different height. Not just the outlet, but also door handles, some small details, seams in the wallpaper, and so on. So Putin has 3 offices for himself. Can you imagine? That's how paralyzed he is by fear. He's afraid a drone might fly into his bald little office somewhere. He's just completely paralyzed by fear. Well, yeah. And now they've sent out Putin's press secretary again to tell everyone how bad things will be if Russia's conditions in this war with Ukraine aren't accepted. Peskov stated that sooner or later Ukraine will have to return to negotiations, but from much worse positions. Peskov said that Kyiv's statement about ending negotiations formalized its unwillingness to continue contacts. Well, it feels like they think everyone is an idiot. Just remember their demands, their appetites not so long ago, and how those appetites changed throughout the fall. So Peskov says, you'll come back to us, you'll crawl back, but the terms will be much worse. Let's recall. And let me remind you that the Russians illegally claimed for themselves all 4 Ukrainian regions and Crimea, calling it their territory. They now consider it their territory, even though in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, which I remind you they fully incorporated into their constitution, they couldn't even occupy the regional centers of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. They fully incorporated them, including these cities, even though they were never there, never reached them. That's it, they say, now it's all ours. By the way, they were driven out of Kherson. With the same logic, they could have just entered Donetsk region, occupied part of it, and then claimed all of Ukraine. They could even add Moldova while they're at it. On what basis, really? So why am I bringing this up, this little excursion into history? They demanded, give us everything completely. 4 regions and Crimea, withdraw your troops completely. Otherwise, they said, we'll take 6. That was Medinsky who said that. Not 4, but 6. Withdraw voluntarily. We haven't been able to occupy them in 11 years, so just hand them over to us yourselves. How about that level of audacity? Now their appetites have shrunk. Now they want the whole Donbass, meaning Donetsk and Luhansk regions. And in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, they're willing to stop at the front line. So it turns out their appetites have decreased. But now there are also sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft. So who will now come to the negotiating table from a much weaker position? Peskov. Don't take everyone for idiots. Incidentally, Peskov, following Lavrov, began asking Trump to resume negotiations with Putin. He said this in an interview with CNN. Moscow is ready to establish relations with Washington as quickly as America is ready. The day before, an absolutely identical statement was made. We sincerely hope that President Trump is still willing to facilitate a political and diplomatic resolution to the Ukrainian issue, says Peskov. It's not an issue, it's a war here. A war. And he emphasized the need to improve bilateral relations. According to him, the current situation leads to, attention, here comes the sly mustachioed trickster, look where he's aiming. According to him, the current situation leads to us losing time, losing money, losing profit, Peskov stated. Well, you in Russia are definitely losing out. But as you can see, they've decided to press on a key issue for Donald Trump. Losing money, losing profit. Clever. Well, Lukashenko decided not to fall behind Putin here, also trying to claim what's not his. He just put on some kind of circus at the border. At the end of last month, Lithuania closed its border with Belarus because of balloons carrying contraband attached to giant weather balloons. Well, they would attach cigarettes to these big balloons and send them flying across the border into Lithuania. When they became a serious problem, to the point that Vilnius airport had to suspend its operations because of these weather balloons. Lithuania said, that's it, we've run out of patience, we're closing the border with Belarus. Do you know what Lukashenko did in response? He basically seized all the trucks with Lithuanian license plates that were on Belarusian territory at that moment. In other words, he's even threatening that they could be confiscated. Right now they've been sent to paid parking lots which cost over 100 euros. The owners of these trucks have to pay for each day. Not all the drivers can go home, some are spending the night in their trucks. So Lukashenko has taken the drivers hostage, taken the trucks hostage, and is saying, open the border. What a despicable bastard he is, right? He and Putin are just two greedy, thieving old men who are never satisfied. I remember Putin's words. I remember how he told the story with a smile. How he would steal American technologies, the famous grab and snatch, tisap tsarap. At one of the forums, when asked why Russia doesn't extract shale oil, since the technology is complicated and requires a lot of investment, Putin said then, and this is a direct quote, "We'll wait until the Americans spend money on the technology and then we'll just grab it." Well, he's just a vile, thieving old man, that's all. And along with this grab and snatch approach, Russia has another favorite pastime, boasting about how they're going to surpass and outpace everyone, how everything they have is innovative, how there's nothing like it anywhere else, and so on. The first driverless taxi may appear in Moscow in 2026, but for now there will still be a test driver in the car. This was reported by the Russian government. I guess that robot will probably be the driver, the one that collapsed on stage. I'm probably not revealing any secrets when I say that there is no automotive industry in Russia right now. It simply doesn't exist. 90% is made from Chinese parts. They just assemble Chinese parts, for example, at the Moskvich factory. In the end, a Moskvich sticker is slapped on the car. That's all that's Russian about it, because the label is written in Russian. Russia doesn't produce modern cars, it just assembles Chinese models with a screwdriver and calls them Lada or Moskvich. So when Putin tells you about super weapons that have no analogs, just remember that Russia still can't create an automatic transmission for a car. They can't even do a copy-paste job, they can't even copy it. Not just the transmission, but not even nails. Remember, Matvienko was recently shocked that Russia doesn't produce its own nails. Any import substitution is just a money grab. And then they just stick a Russian label on a Chinese product. That's all there is to it. Look, we've invented something, check it out. The first Russian smartphone. That's how everything works with them. Well, friends, as always, I want to say a huge thank you to all the countries that are helping Ukraine in these difficult times. Absolutely everyone. And to you, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and I kindly ask you, let's support our combat medics. The link to donate is in the description of this video. Take care of yourselves and glory to Ukraine.